immer frabo. Today we are talking about time. Maybe you remember that a few months ago there was a new post on Natviteri in which Paul Frommer explained how to say times in Natvi. So how to say that it is, 6:30. And back then I wanted to make a video that laid out all the time-related things we have and already know. I wanted to post the video the week after we got the post, and I never got to do it because real life happened. I was writing my bachelor thesis and so on and so forth. So yeah, just a few months later, finally this video is there. We will start big and go to smaller, so we'll start with the year and the word for time in general, and then we will go down to parts of the day and hours and minutes, so big to small. And you will on some slides see this yellow thing with the TT in the corner. The TT stands for Tautute, so sky person, and it will always occur when we are talking about words or about structures that we have in Natvi to talk about sky people stuff. For example, we have words for the months, but the Natvi don't use the same calendar we do. Actually, we don't even know if they have some kind of a calendar. That's not known, and if they have one, they will definitely not use January, February, and so on. So, because of that, some words we will talk about today, they exist, and they probably in universe occurred because of contact between humans and the Natvi. So the Natvi wanted to talk with the sky people about also their culture. So words occurred, words were not made up but developed to talk about these things. But the Natvi themselves would not use them to talk about time. So if you want to do it the true Natvi way, then ignore all the things that have the Tau to the symbol in the corner. But of course, we are human. We are not Natvi. Therefore, it is pretty hard to talk about all these things if we only want to try to use pure Natvi without any influence from humans. And to be fair, language changes. So it's totally normal that different cultures and different languages influence each other. But for the beginning, we first need to know what is the word for time in Natvi. And there are actually two that can cause some confusion for some learners. First of all, we have the grrr, the general word for time. Just a quick warning as always, my R's are very much off. I cannot do the Natvi rolled R. I also cannot do singular R, so the tap. So you will hear as always my weird pronunciation of these two letters. And probably I will also mess up at some other points. I'm doing my best, but don't take this as a pronunciation guide, please. So grrr, time. And then we also have alo, time, turn, instance. Let's look at some examples of those two words. First, let's look at examples of grrr, time. Geluwerset grrr atan. I don't have much time now. Slemetampe grrre. But most of the time, literally, but in the majority of the time. So you see the word for time got the genitive case ending here because it's a noun, so it can get case endings. Ngari o fekem sivi fifja grti avun. If you do it like this, you'll save time. Grro len ihem anafe u. Sometimes such things happen. So here it works like an adverb and it means sometimes. And we achieve that by adding the o suffix, so some or any. And you will see that suffix more often today because it is actually used with many different time words to use them in adverbial way. And you can also, when you want to ask for what time, so when, you can use grr together with pe, which makes a question. So what? Pe grr, note the lenition happening here because the pe. And then grrpe. So both of them mean of course the same. What time literally, so when. So you see the word grr can be used to generally talk about time. Let's look at alo next. Fmi pivel te alo avol newin. try to say that 8 times fast. So, alo a wohl 8 times. If we want to say the next time or the last time, we can say alo ahai or alo aham. But actually there are also shorter words for that. So we have, I think, hayalo and hamalo. So those work too, but they come from those two constructions. We also have shorter versions for 1 time, 2 times, and 3 times. So aulo, 1 time from au and alo. Melo, 2 times from mune or the me prefix and alo. And then elo, of course, from the e prefix together with alo again. If we want to say more times, so 4 times or 5 times, then we just use the construction from the first sentence. So for example, 4 times would just be zinga alo or alo a zing. We can also say first time, second time, and so on just by using the ordinal numbers. So auve is first, so auvea alo would be the first time, or alo a auve. Movea alo would be the second time. We could of course also say alo a move. Next, let's look at some adjectives with which we can describe how long something is. So we have nun, which is long of time. Don't confuse this with nim, which also shows up if you search for long in the dictionary. Nim is long as of how physically long is something. So for example, the distance between two things can be nim, long. But if we are talking of a long time, then we would talk about nun. There's actually a second word, an, which means much or also long. But this one, if you want it to mean long, is only used with grr. And we have yol for short of time. If we want to talk about length of time, so the noun length, then we would talk about nun yol. Let's look at some example sentences. So, ana grr, long time, yoda grr, short time. Nga harmahau be nun yol. Or, nga harmahau nun yol be. How long did you sleep? So, what length, how long did you sleep? Sunu weralu, slefe se frven, beje lu nun nehaung. I like Ralu, but this visit of his is too long. So nun nehaung, too long. So here we see that we want to say long, but not long times. So t'ana grr. But we want to say that the visit is long. Because we can use t'an only in combination with grr to say long. We here use nun instead. Yola grr, t'ana grr, geht's It doesn't matter how long a time. Literally, short time, long time, doesn't matter. Grr afot epitok lut an ne damsrag. Have they been in the fire long enough? So literally, the time which they have been in the fire or which they are in the fire is long enough. So here we see again an example how an is used in combination with grr. Yeah, and we also have an adverb an grr, which means for a long time. So I could, for example, as an answer for the first question, I could say oe harmahau an grr. I slept for a long time. Next, we of course have a word for a year, zisit. Let's look at some example sentences. Zisito amr vtolia oe. I studied for 5 years. You probably remember this sentence from the first movie where Norm said this one to Grace. And here you again see the o at zisit. So in this case the o, which usually means some or any, is used in combination with a time word to express a duration of time. So how long did you study? For 5 years. So that way we can talk about time durations. Ngari sulaleo pol aya zisit. How old are you? literally regarding you, how many years have passed. This is the most common way to ask someone how old they are. Neje tislaneri aka aizisit niwot se yi oe irayo nitan. Thank you so much for your support throughout the years. So ka aizisit niwot throughout the years or throughout all the years. And if you want to say last year or next year, there we get two other really great suffixes, namely am, zisidam, last year, and zisidai, next year. You probably know these from the infixes. So am is the past infix and I is the future infix. You will also see these infixes more often today because you can generally use them very often to make the next instance of a time word or the last instance of a time word. And just two other random words. These are definitely sky people. There should be the sky people sign up there, but because the rest of the slide is about Navi stuff, like not about sky people stuff, I didn't add it, but zisit noon, leap year, and zisit noontr, leap year day, should of course be for sky people only. The Navi don't have that concept. So, next, let's talk about the zisikr, the season. This one comes obviously from zisit and grr, so year and time. There are four seasons. Ziskrmipau, spring, literally new grow season. Ziskrsom, summer, so the warm season. Ziskrzaun, autumn, so the harvest season. And Ziskrweu, winter, so the cold season. Let's look at some example sentences again. Fra zisikr by gilvane nan ne ul. Every season, the river dries up more and more. So the water of the river goes down more and more, decreases more and more. Zaifasuk tsukanom lu grka fizisikr ne au. Those berries are available during this season only. Tenkr lerok siskrsomil te iat silpei oe aingari te lan livu lefpom ulte terei sivaprte. While the summer nears its end, so the siskrsomil with the L ending, the rock approaches the iat, the end. I hope your hearts are well and you enjoy life. Complicated sentence, but it's nice to see again an example of how the time word is used here as a noun as in the other sentences with a case ending. Next, let's talk about sky person stuff. Tautute. I was the month from was so that means a 12th. Zisite, so a 12th of the year, which is a month. We have words for the months and they are very predictable. So, was au is January, the first month or the month 1. Was moon, month 2, so February. Was is March, so there you see it shortened. Was tsing, April. Was May. Was buk, June. Then next slide, next month. Was kin, July. Was vol, August. Was lau, September. Was moon, October. Was bay, November. And lastly, was sing, December. So if you know the numbers, then this should be rather easy for you. So you just have to remember the word for was month and then the numbers. And sometimes it gets a bit shortened, but it's all pretty simple, I'd say. Let's look at some examples of the I was the months in use. Was p'eo amr kesolup dompa. It hasn't rained for 5 months. So literally for 5 months, rain hasn't fallen. Here you again see the O. Was p'eo amr for 5 months. So the O helps to make this an adverbial phrase and to say for 5 months, to have a duration of time here. Se peioe aingari ne wat was p'ekin snilvei ne zan. I hope that as for you all, July has started well. And again we have the same words with the am and the I. So was p'eam last month, was p'ei next month. Note that the stress shifts here, so it is was p'e month, but was p'eam last month, and was p'ei next month. This happens to all words that have this I and the am. Next, more tautuute stuff, more Sky people stuff. Weeks. So a week has 7 days, at least for us. So we call it a quintr, which comes from quineatr, so 7 days. Quintr week. If you want to talk about the work week, which usually is 5 days, then mratr, so mrtr, my nightmare to pronounce. 5-day work week. And for the weekend we get moontr. So this obviously comes from mooneatr, the weekend, because it is 2 days long. So let's talk about aihintr. Let's look at some examples. Femuntr ut asioe hu eilan. This weekend I meet with a friend. So here you see femuntr, this weekend, which also kind of works like an adverbial phrase. Kintram faifamrelsiuhu oe ut asoleyi. Last week I met with those writers. So here we again see am in use. So kintr, a week, kintram, last week. Yeah, and here I also added those words. Kintram last week, kintrai next week. And we have the same also for mrtr and moontr. Next we have tr, which is a day. You already heard that with the kintr words. And ton, night. Of course, we want to describe the days of the week. And again, this is obviously tautuute territory. So the Na'vi don't call their days Monday, Tuesday, and so on. So let's look at the words we have here. Tr'auve, the first day is Sunday. For everyone who's not in the US, Paul Frommer, who made up this scheme, so who creates the Na'vi language, he's from the US, and apparently in the US Sunday is considered the first day. Very weird for me as a European, but yeah. Tr'auve, the first day, is the Sunday. Then I think you can very easily see how this will continue. Tr'muve, Monday. Tr'p'eve, Tuesday. Tr'tsive, Wednesday. Tr'mrve, Thursday. Tr'puve, Friday. Tr'kive, Saturday. So let's look at the word tr in use. Po fnarmu frakr, sletrro polte. She was always silent, but one day she spoke. Here we see something interesting. Before we had the o, so the tr, we had the o on time words to mean a time duration. So 4 or 5 years, 4 or 5 months. But here we use it in a different way. Here we say to say that one specific day, like this one day, she spoke. One day she spoke. So what's the matter here? I can also show you the next sentence, which is Pol le fiati le Na'vi vtolia trro. He studied Na'vi for a day. So here we see that we can actually have 2 different meanings with the o suffix. So one day or for a day. This, of course, can cause confusion, so there are ways to disambiguate this. Namely, we can use adpositions. We can also say povnarmu frakr se ro sro polte. So at a day. One day she spoke. And note that now we have the definition because of the ro. And for the time duration for a day, we can use the adposition ka. So ka tro for a day. You don't have to do this, but you can do this if context is not clear which of these two interpretations it is. And if we are already talking about one day, there's actually another thing we can do with this, or another meaning it can have in English. So let's look at that. Fete kankem viri welkin awa trti ne au. For this project, I only need 1 day. So here we literally mean 1 day as opposed to 2 days or 3 days. So because of that, we just use awa tr, 1 day here. Again, we also have tram, yesterday, trai, tomorrow, and fetr, today. Next, one more word that I haven't really seen in use, but on from day and on night is the day-night cycle of Pandora. I don't think I have an example of that because, as I said, I didn't really see it being used that much. And now the really important word for today is trpe, from trehap-e, so part of the day. And that's exactly what it means, part of day. Before we go on to talking about the sautute, so the tautute parts of the day, let's look at how the Natvi structure the day. There are many pieces of the day, starting with trong, dawn before sunrise. Trongmau, the dawn after sunrise. Rewon, morning. Srekamtr, the time before noon. So sre before, kamtr is noon, so srekamtr, the time before noon. Kamtr, midday, noon. Kamtrmau, immediately after noon. Ha'ngir, afternoon. Gaim, evening, before twilight or late afternoon. And yeah, this is only half of them. I have another slide with them. Sreton ong, the evening before sunset. On ong, nightfall, sunset or dusk. On ong mau, twilight after sunset. Srekamt on, before midnight. Then kamt on, midnight, so the middle of the night. Kamt on mau, after midnight. And sre sr ong, before dawn. And then the cycle begins from the beginning again. Those words are how the Natvi structure the day. So if you ask them when should we meet, they will not say at 3 o'clock, of course. They might say, oh, let's meet after afternoon, or let's meet in the afternoon at the Hangir, or let's meet Kaim, so in the evening or the late afternoon. So let's see how the Natvi would use these. For pehem, pesrpe, or for pehem, trpepe. What part of the day will they arrive? Note that this could also ask for a time, like for a tautute time. But right now, let's talk about how the Natvi would do this. The Natvi now would, for example, answer with something like, oh, they come at midnight, or they come after midnight. You have seen we have this whole long list of words to describe times of the day. And the Natvi would use those to answer and to show a time or to express a time. Ado ahai oel sasya'u mirewon. Next time, I'll come in the morning. Nen yom kamtr ul efu ohak kaim. The less you eat at noon, the hungrier you'll feel in the evening. One interesting thing you see in this sentence is that in the one before, we had to say mirewon, so in the morning. So we used an adposition there because these parts of the day are nouns. But apparently, if we follow this sentence, we can also just use them as adverbs. So amtr, without any adposition, here is used to mean at noon. And keim, without any adposition, is used here in the sentence to mean in the evening. Unfortunately, we don't have that much information or that many more examples. But yeah, you can use them that way too. And of course, we also have words like firewon, this morning, rewono, one morning, rewonam, yesterday morning, rewonai, tomorrow morning. So, now before we go on to the the way of telling time, let's look at some last Natvi words. So words that the Natvi would use to describe time, namely some more words to describe very short times. We have swau, which is a moment. We have hekr, which is a second, or we would call it a second, but it's just a very short time. And we have yerin, which is an adverb and means soon. Based on these words, we have a few more, namely swau tsiep, little moment or second, so it's just swau with the tsiep behind it, so the diminutive. And we have iswawam, just a moment ago, so here we see the arm again. And fitting for this, we also have iswawai, just a second from now, in the future. And one last one, we also have yerin, which is immediately, but not as soon as iswawai. So just a small collection of words that I didn't want to completely ignore when doing this lesson. I don't use them that often, but it's nice to know them if you want to talk about a very short time. Let's look at some examples. Menareng tsiekil loreuti olampi atsaswau wo werniwot. That instant, so that moment, tsaswau, when Jake touched the helicorator, the loreu. I honestly, I don't like these, the English or whatever names they are. So the loreu, these are the things that Jake touches and then they become small. In the forest, I was totally amazed. Mauhikr ayoe tisyet au. Will return after a short time. So mauhikr, after a short time. Tsun mivek u hikr srak. May I interrupt for a moment? So you see hikr actually can be used two different ways. As a noun, mauhikr, after a short time. But also it can be used as an adverb meaning for a moment. Tsun mivek u hikr srak. May I interrupt for a moment or for a short time? And some more examples. Silpeioe la yuweru yerin setsanaf maun. I hope I will soon have good news. So I could also, the sentence could also have been solved differently by replacing the la yu with the you, so the soon infix. But you can also just use the normal I infix, or the general future infix, in combination with yerin. Awa swautsiep, oef beril. Just a moment, I'm thinking. I think awa swautsiep is literally the most used sentence, maybe after Rut Elivain, please repeat, in Natvi conversations, especially when you're still beginner. Because like if you're frantically looking up stuff in the dictionary and you're like, oh, awa swautsiep, one moment, I need to find this word. So that's definitely a useful one. I use it all the time. So, awa swautsiep divu wer. May I have a tiny moment. So may there be a small moment to me. Yeah, now it's finally time. Tau to the time telling. So, we already talked about trpe, which is time of the day or part of the day. And now we can say trpe saututje, so a part of the day of the sky people. But of course, this is a mouthful, quite a mouthful. We don't want to say it all the time. So we can just say trpe, and from context, it's clear that we mean an hour with this. So a part of the day in this case, is an hour, if we talk about the time, sky people time. There's also this mouthful, evo e, so evo, which is 24, then tr and e. So a 24th of the day, which is also an hour. But usually, in most cases, you will just hear or say tr e, part of the day, and from context it will be clear that you mean hour. We also have trpevi, a minute, and trpeviciep, a second. So what do we do with these now? We can say stuff like oe pehem mau trpevi amr. I'll be there in 5 minutes, literally after 5 minutes. Or oe pehem kai trpevi amr. I'll be there in 5 minutes, so kai from now on in. So both adpositions work to express such a thing. Po te kankem soli trpeo amr. Or po te kankem soli ka trpeo amr. She has worked for 5 hours, so here we use exactly the same as we learned before with the o, and then optionally the adposition ka to indicate a duration of time. So now if we want to say a specific time, so at 5 o'clock, so if we want to say 5 o'clock, then what we actually mean is the end of the 5th hour, because think about it. If we talk about 1 a.m. in the night, then 1 a.m. in the night actually is the end of the 1st hour after midnight, right? So originally, or how it's supposed to be, is that 5 o'clock is te ia, so the end, trpeye amrve, so the end of the 5th hour. But of course, again, that's quite a mouthful. No one wants to say that. So what we do is we just say trp'e amrve, 5th hour. And that's 5 o'clock. So one last word is krlik, which is a point in time. It comes from lik, which is a point somewhere, and kr, time. Let's talk about that. If I want to ask what time, then I can ask pe or krpe, which we had before, but I can also ask pe lik or krlikpe, what time. And then I can answer with something like krlik lu trp'e amrve. The time, or the point in time, is the 5th part of the day, so the 5th hour. But I can also shorten this, and I can just answer to what time with lumrve, it's the 5th. And from context it will be clear that we mean the 5th hour with that. Now I could ask something like nga pehem pe, when will you arrive? What time will you arrive? And I could answer something like ro, so at, srp'e amrve, at the 5th hour. Note that the trp'e gets united to srp'e here because of the ro. And again, I can shorten it and I can just say romrve, at the 5th. Let's add minutes into the mix. So now it gets a bit more full, the slides. I'm sorry for that. 5:30. How would we say that? We start with the 5. Trp'e amrve, so the 5th hour. And then we can just add the minutes with se. So trp'e amrve, se trp'evi ap evo fu. So evo fu being 36 in octal. So yes, we need to convert from decimal to octal here. That's annoying, I know, but yeah, we don't understand our decimal numbers. It would not make sense to use them here. And of course, also here we can shorten it. So 5:30 in shorter would then be mrve se evo fu. So we can just leave out the trp'e, the hour, and the trp'evi, the minute. Let's look at some more examples. 5:20. Trp'e amrve se trp'evi a mevo sing. Or mrve se mevo sing. 4:40, mevo sing, sre mrve. So here we see something new. Instead of saying the hour and then the minutes, we can also say the 20 minutes before the 5th. By the way, of course, we could again also say the long version. So we could also say trp-evi amevo sing, sre trp-e amrve. That would work totally, but I'm lazy, and also the slide just looked very full and very uncomfortable, so I decided to leave out the longer versions for most from now on, and we will look at the short versions mostly. But we will also look at some long versions when they're interesting. In this case, 5:24, mrve sip evol, literally 5 and 24. Again, we could also use the long versions. 4:50 again would be vo moon sre mrve. By the way, we could also turn it around. We could also literally say 4 and 50 minutes. That would also work, but I think this is just easier, right? Because it's easier to say 10 than it's to say 50, especially if you have to recalculate the octa number. And here we have midnight, so 30 minutes after midnight, and for midnight we just use keo. So trp-e a keo, se vo mr, or keo se vo mr. So now you maybe noticed that I made stuff stupidly complicated, because like, who wants to, like, if you 5:30, it's like so long. We can shorten it down by using maul, or for some other than pan or zip-e. So maul means half, pan means a third, and zip-e means a fourth. So 5:30 could also become drp-e a mrve se maul, or mrve se maul. So literally 5 and half. 5:20, which is 5 plus a third of an hour, could also just become mrve se pan. 5:15, 15 being a quarter of an hour, could also be mrve se zip-e. So 5 and a quarter. And we can do the same if we put them in front again. So 4:40 is basically just a third before 5. So pan sre srp-e a mrve, or pan sre mrve. And the same for a quarter before 5. Zip-e sre srp-e a mrve, or zip-e sre mrve. A quarter before 5. Now, one thing that we have ignored completely so far is it AM or PM? And here again is the question, how do the Natvi handle this? The Natvi, of course, don't really know the concept. Kaya Paul has said that when talking about time in Natvi, we would prefer the 24-hour system. So basically the thing that is used in many countries, but not the US. It's also not, there are a few more countries I think that don't use it. But the 24-hour system is just more clear. So instead of having 3 a.m. versus 3 p.m., you have then 3 and 15. So in the 24-hour system, we don't need the a.m. versus p.m. But of course, sometimes you, like, even though when talking in Natvi, the 24-hour system should be preferred, you can still use srekamtr and maukamtr to indicate it is before noon or after noon. So 5:30 would be, again, we already had that, mrve se maul. And if you now want to say 5:30 p.m., usually what you would do is you would just use the 24-hour system. So you would say trp-e a mevo lauve se maul. So mevo lau is 17, and then se maul. For 12, so exactly 12 noon, you can use kamtr, which is the middle of the day. And for 0, just midnight, you can use kamton, which is just midnight. As I said, we can use srekamtr to indicate AM and maukamtr to indicate PM if we want to talk about, like, if we want to use the 12-hour system and want to disambiguate them. I don't know if you are used to a 12-hour system and don't want and find the 24-hour system too complicated. Here are two words you can use to indicate AM and PM. One interesting thing here is that srekamtr we already had before, but maukamtr we haven't seen before. We haven't seen this word before, but when I asked Kaya Paul how we would indicate PM or if they would indicate PM, he answered this word. But if you remember the part about the parts of the day before, we had kamtr mau. We didn't have mau kamtr. We can of course say mau kamtr as two words because mau is just an adposition. But he wrote it together like this. I have no idea if that was a mistake. So if he intended it to be kamtr mau or if he intended it to be two words, mau kamtr. Because maukamtr, as I have it on the slide right now, as far as I know, isn't in the dictionary because we haven't seen it before he answered it in a random comment on my question. So yeah, no idea. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe we also have maukamtr now. Anyway, he said this is the way to indicate PM, after the middle of the day. Now there's also another way, la herfiao, because this post was very recent, just a few months ago. But very long ago, there was already a forum post where he answered tons of different questions, and there he also talked about how to say time in Navi. And Karyu Zhang actually asked Kaya Paul then in the blog post if this old way still is valid, and Paul said yes, both are valid. So let's quickly look at that other way too. That way is a bit simpler. I guess that was because back then he just wanted to have a quick way to refer to time. Yeah. And in that other way, we would just say both numbers literally after each other and then with the day of the time. The time of days, sorry for that. So 2:30 would just be mune ewofu ha'ngir. So 2:30 and then afternoon. And you see on the right side, I showed how you would write it. So the H there is for ha'ngir. Yeah. So this is the way how, the first way he told us back then how to say time in Navi. Of course, that's far less elaborate. I like the new way more, but also just because I only knew, I didn't know about this old way, so I'm just not used to it. Another example, mr evol rewon. So 5:24 in the morning. And yeah, here I have an overview that was also in that old forum post. I honestly don't know from whom it is. So maybe was in the post, it's not specified who made this picture. Maybe it's from Kaya Paul himself. Or maybe it's from the person who made the post, which would be Proton. No idea, but it's a nice overview. Because it shows which time belongs to which word, basically. So we have 1 a.m. being on Mao directly after midnight, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m. being on, then 5 a.m., 6 a.m. being Rewon or Sre Srong or Trong Mao and so on. So this can be helpful if for those you are unsure which daytime word you are supposed to use. This is a nice overview. Keep in mind that these are not set in stone. So, for example, in the winter, the sun only goes up at 8 or 9 or 10 a.m. I don't know, honestly, here. So then, for example, 8 would still be Sre Srong, so before dawn. But in the summer, the sun already goes up at 6 a.m. here. So then 6 a.m. would already be Rewon, or would already be Trong Mao after sunrise. Also, depending on which place on Earth you are, these daytime words are a bit different. Because in some place on Earth, the sun goes down earlier or later, or the days are longer or shorter. So because of this is not set in stone. You should be clear that you should use the word that's appropriate for your situation. So if for you, in where you come from, I don't know, at 8 a.m. the sun goes up, then that would be Trong, the start of the day, when the sun goes up. Also notice how this is the left side shows the 12-hour system, the right side shows the 24-hour system, and of course the numbers are all in octal. So you see that from 7 it immediately jumps to 10, because of course the 10 octal is the decimal 8. And yeah, that was it. As always, if you have any questions, you can ask them in the comment or contact me on Discord. And I hope you had some fun, learned something, and if you are still here, then comment your current time in Navi. Hi, Yadovai!